or Genesis 33, let's call this one relief. Why? Because relief seems to be the dominant emotion that comes through this time as I read the chapter. But that relief seems to be based on the fact that as Jacob is approaching a peace with Esau, they have both had enough. Jacob, as we talked about yesterday, having had enough friction to make him as open to peace as he's probably ever been. And we're going to see Esau having enough positivity in the meantime to make him apparently open to peace with Jacob in ways he might not have been in the past. And so how do we know Jacob had enough friction? Well, we talked about how Laban put him through it for all the riches that Jacob was going to leave Laban with. It wasn't going to come easy. And so he has enough friction with Laban that by the time he finally makes peace, he's ready to leave. But he leaves the friction that he had with Laban, having to confront the fact that he hadn't exactly been the man of God that he needed to be. And so we're going to see him in chapter 32 wrestling with God. And that friction is going to leave him limping into his encounter with Esau. How do we know? Chapter 32, beginning at verse 24, it's going to read, "And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. And the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob. When the man saw he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him." Skipping down to verse 30. "So Jacob called the name of that place Peniel, saying, 'For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered.' The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip." And so understand, he is limping out of his encounter with God into his encounter with Esau. And any fight that he might have had left in him seems to have been drained out. And so now we're seeing him approach Esau with a level of humility he might not have ever had in the past. And that's going to set a healthy context, however, for their meeting as we see them in chapter 33, beginning around verse 8, as Esau sees the company approaching. He says, or it says, verse 8, "Esau said, 'What do you mean by all this company that I met?' Jacob answered, 'To find favor in the sight of my Lord.'" Pause there and notice maybe one of the first things we want to appreciate, and that is the fact that, just as we said yesterday, that the time helped this meeting. The distance might have helped this meeting. And the fact that he's trying to make some effort at restitution is helping this meeting. The candor that he had with God is another thing he added to this attempt to make peace. And now we're seeing that that candor with God is matched by his candor with his brother, admitting that he was wrong, and that he is now trying to approach as humbly as he can to make peace in a situation where he might not ever truly be able to make it materially right. But he's changed his perspective, and he's done it in candor. Moving on, verse 9, "But Esau said, 'I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself.' Jacob said, 'No, please, if I have found favor in your sight, then accept my present from my hand. For I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God, and you have accepted me. Please accept my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough.' Thus he urged him, and he took it." Understand this. Peace is one of those things that we never want to try to shortchange, just because, like we talked about in earlier chapters, what's having stuff if you can't have stuff securely and in peace? And that's what these brothers seem to have realized. One, Esau has had enough to keep him busy in the meantime with positivity, that he seems to have had the time to allow the tension to dissipate. And so one of the lessons for us is staying busy is one thing, but staying busy with productive things is another. And now moving forward, Jacob, having enough, realizes that, look, I don't want to cut corners on the peace that I can have with my brother. So he's willing to buy peace full price. And in life, even though it can make sense in times like this that are economically tight to cut corners on some things, peace is not one of those things we want to cut corners on. So Dr. Willard Harley wrote a book called His Needs, Her Needs, encouraging us to understand the value of a concept called the love bank. Jacob here is making a full deposit in the love bank, realizing that peace is not something you want to try to buy at half price.